Working at a coffee shop in Seattle wasn't exactly the life I dreamed of. It felt like every other millennial cliché: hipster glasses, craft lattes, and the constant hum of indie music in the background. The monotony of brewing espresso and small talk with regulars should have been mind-numbing, but for me, it was just camouflage. The real me, the part that hid behind the barista apron, harbored a dark, maddening secret. My name is Cassidy, and I can see the future. It sounds like a gift, doesn't it? Like something out of a superhero comic or a sci-fi novel. But it's a curse, a relentless, sanity-eroding curse. No matter what I see, no matter how dire or mundane the vision, no one ever believes me. And when my predictions come true, it's as if my warnings were never spoken. The memory of my words simply vanishes from the minds of those I tried to warn. Every day I wake up knowing that I might glimpse some fragment of the future, whether it's a spilled cup of coffee or a catastrophic accident. The visions strike without warning, like lightning on a clear day. They're not physically intrusive, no blinding flashes or debilitating headaches. Instead, it's like wearing a VR set on the side of my face, the future playing out in my peripheral vision, clear enough to see but not to touch or change. I remember the first time it happened. I was 16, standing at the edge of the school cafeteria, and I saw my best friend slip on a puddle of spilled milk. I shouted a warning, but she looked at me like I was speaking another language. When she fell moments later, everyone laughed. No one remembered my shout. That's when I realized my words were doomed to be forgotten, my visions dismissed as mere coincidence. In the years since, I've learned to keep my foresight to myself mostly. It's easier to bear the burden alone than to face the ridicule and disbelief. Yet, every so often, the urgency of a vision forces me to speak up, knowing full well it will lead to another moment of silent frustration. Today was one of those days. The shop was busy, a typical Seattle morning rush. When I saw her, she was just another customer, a 20-something woman with a kind smile and bright eyes, ordering her morning coffee. But then, in the corner of my vision, I saw it. She was going to be drugged. The vision was brief but clear. My heart raced as I handed her the cup, my mind battling the familiar hopelessness. "Excuse me," I blurted out, my voice trembling. "You need to be careful. Someone's going to try to drug you." She looked at me, confusion clouding her face. I could see the skepticism forming in her eyes, the disbelief I had come to expect. But for some reason, this time felt different. Maybe, just maybe, she would listen. As she walked away, the familiar weight of despair settled in my chest. No one ever believes me. The rest of the morning crawled by in a haze of steamed milk and espresso shots. I couldn't shake the image of the young woman from my mind. The intensity of the vision and my desperate attempt to warn her lingered like a bitter aftertaste of overbrewed coffee. Each time the door swung open, my eyes darted towards it, half expecting to see her return, to see her either safe or more likely in distress. My shifts at the coffee shop were always the same: monotonous, predictable, and safe. At least, they were for everyone else. For me, they were peppered with glimpses of the near future, some mundane, others terrifying, but the outcome was always the same. No one believed me, and I was left alone with the burden of knowing. There was the time I saw a man spill his coffee and ruin a stack of important papers. I tried to warn him, but he brushed me off. Moments later, he cursed loudly as the coffee splashed over his documents. He looked at me then, eyes narrowed, as if trying to remember something he couldn't quite grasp. Or the day I saw a car crash in the parking lot. I ran out to stop the driver, shouting about the danger. He just shook his head, thinking I was crazy. When the crash happened, I stood there, hopeless, the sound of crunching metal echoing in my ears, my words already fading from their minds. The visions come on suddenly, without warning, like a shadow slowly coming into focus until they're as clear as day. It's not like a headache or a dizzy spell, it's more subtle. It's like a second screen overlaying reality. One moment I'm here, and the next I'm seeing a snippet of what's to come. Sometimes it's as harmless as someone dropping a plate. Other times it's a life-altering event, like a tragic accident, or as I saw today, an attempted drugging. I tried to explain it once to my mother. I was 17 and I'd seen a vision of our neighbor's house catching fire. I begged her to warn them, but she just smiled and patted my head, telling me I had a vivid imagination. When the fire happened and they lost everything, she looked at me, bewildered, as if trying to grasp a fleeting memory. It was like she knew something important had slipped through her fingers, but she couldn't remember what. That's when I learned to keep my curse to myself. My life became a series of half-hearted warnings and frustrated silences. The curse of knowing but never being believed. It drove me mad at times. The isolation of it, the helplessness. I began to doubt myself, to wonder if maybe I was the crazy one. But every new vision, every ignored warning reminded me that this was real. I could see the future, but I was powerless to change it. Today felt different, though. The woman with the bright eyes and kind smile, she hadn't dismissed me outright. She had listened. Even if she didn't believe me fully, it was a tiny crack in the wall of disbelief I faced every day, and that tiny crack gave me a glimmer of hope. A dangerous, fragile hope. By the time my shift ended, I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. I clocked out, wrapped myself in my worn-out coat, and stepped into the chilly Seattle air. The streets were still bustling, the city's energy pulsing around me. I walked slowly, my mind replaying the morning's events over and over. I reached my tiny apartment, a shoebox in a rundown building, and collapsed onto the couch. I wanted to forget, to drown out the constant barrage of unwanted knowledge. But as I closed my eyes, I knew sleep wouldn't come that easy. The visions, the curse, they never truly left me. And then, just as I was drifting into a restless slumber, there was a knock on my door. My heart raced. Who could it be at this hour? I opened the door, and there she was. The woman from the coffee shop, her face pale and her eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. "You were right," she whispered. "You were right about everything." My breath caught in my throat as I stared at her, my mind racing to catch up with the moment. This had never happened before. No one ever believed me, let alone came back to confirm a vision. The woman stepped inside, glancing nervously over her shoulder before shutting the door behind her. "Come in," I stammered, motioning to the small, cluttered living room. "Sit down." She sank onto the edge of the couch, her hands trembling as she clutched her bag. I noticed a small device peeking out from the open zipper, a roofie test kit. My mind reeled. She had actually taken my warnings seriously enough to use it. "You were right," she repeated, her voice steadier now, but still laced with an undercurrent of shock. "I didn't believe you at first, but then I remembered something my mom gave me." She pulled out the test kit and held it up. I thought, what the hell, it can't hurt to check, and it tested positive. My heart pounded in my chest. This was a breakthrough, a crack in the unyielding wall of disbelief I'd faced my entire life. "You actually listened to me," I said, more to myself than to her. "Why?" She shrugged, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know. There was something about the way you said it. You seemed genuine and a little desperate." Desperate. The word stung, but she wasn't wrong. Every warning I issued was a lifeline thrown into a scene of apathy and skepticism, hoping someone, anyone, would grab hold. "What's your name?" I asked, realizing I'd never caught it in the rush of the morning. "Elena," she replied. "And you?" "Cassidy." Elena nodded, absorbing the name. "Cassidy. Can you tell me more about how you knew?" I hesitated. This was uncharted territory. No one had ever asked me to explain before. But here was someone who had not only believed me, but also acted on my warning. Maybe it was time to share my truth, at least part of it. "I see things," I began, searching for the right words. "Visions of the future. They come to me suddenly, without warning. It's like seeing a reflection in the corner of my eye. I can't control it, and no one ever believes me until now." Elena's eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. She listened intently, her face a mask of curiosity and concern. "Has it always been this way?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Since I was a teenager, I've tried to warn people, to prevent bad things from happening, but it never works." They either don't believe me or forget I said anything. That's incredible, Elena said, shaking her head. And terrifying. Welcome to my life, I said with a wry smile. But why did you come back? Why did you trust me? Elena took a deep breath, her gaze steady. I guess I didn't have much to lose by checking, and now I owe you my life. If you hadn't warned me, who knows what would have happened? I felt a rush of gratitude and relief, emotions I hadn't felt in a long time. Thank you for believing me, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You have no idea what this means to me. Elena reached out and squeezed my hand. We need to figure this out, Cassidy. Maybe there's a way to make people listen to you. Before I could respond, a sharp sound shattered the moment. Elena's eyes flicked to the window and I followed her gaze. A shadow moved outside, and then there was a loud crash as the door was kicked open. I barely had time to react before a figure in black lunged at me, a needle gleaming in their hand. Pain exploded in my neck and the world tilted. I tried to fight, but my limbs felt like lead. The last thing I saw was Elena's terrified face as I slipped into darkness. The first thing I noticed when I came to was the cold. It seeped into my bones, making me shiver uncontrollably. My eyes fluttered open, and I tried to make sense of my surroundings. Concrete walls stretched out around me, gray and unyielding. I was in a large, dimly lit space, the only light source, a single bulb hanging high above. And then I saw it, the acrylic cell I was trapped in. Clear, smooth walls encased me, and I could see out, but there was nothing beyond except the vast, empty room. Panic set in as I scrambled to my feet, my fingers sliding uselessly over the slick surface of the cell. I was alone, completely and utterly alone. There were no doors, no windows, no sign of where I was or who had brought me here. The last thing I remembered was Elena's terrified face and the sharp pain in my neck as I was darted. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Is anyone there?" Silence. Only my own breathing and the distant hum of machinery somewhere beyond the walls. I sank to the floor, my mind spinning. Where was I? Who had taken me? And what did they want? My visions had never given me any hint of this. No warning, no premonition of my own captivity. It was as if I had been blindsided by fate itself. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time seemed to blur in the monotony of my acrylic prison. Food and water appeared through a small slot at the base of the cell, but no one ever spoke to me or showed themselves. It was a cruel form of torture, the isolation gnawing at my sanity. I tried to focus, to piece together any clues that might explain my situation, but there was nothing, just the cold, the silence, and the endless waiting. The only breaks in the monotony were the visions. They came sporadically, adding to my torment. I saw snippets of lives continuing outside this prison, people walking in the park, a mother playing with her child, a couple arguing in their living room, mundane moments that felt like glimpses into another world, a world I could no longer reach. And then there were the darker visions, accidents, crimes, tragedies unfolding in vivid detail, and my warnings going unheard. One day, a vision struck me with such force that I collapsed to the floor, my head spinning. I saw Elena, her face bruised and her eyes filled with despair. She was being questioned by men in suits, their expressions cold and unyielding. She was pleading, trying to explain something, but they weren't listening. My heart ached as the vision faded, leaving me breathless and terrified for her. "Elena," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry." It felt like an eternity before anything changed. I was lying on the floor, staring at the ceiling, when I heard footsteps approaching. My heart leapt, a mix of hope and fear surging through me. The footsteps grew louder, and then a shadow fell across my cell. A man stood there, dressed in a crisp suit, his face impassive. He regarded me with a detached curiosity, as if I were an interesting specimen, rather than a human being. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice hoarse from disuse. "Why am I here?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied me for a moment longer, then spoke in a calm, measured tone. You have a gift, Cassidy. A rare and valuable gift. I stared at him, confusion and anger boiling inside me. A gift? This curse has ruined my life. He raised an eyebrow, unfazed by my outburst. It may seem like a curse to you, but to others, it is an asset, one that can be harnessed and controlled. Harnessed? Controlled, I echoed, my voice trembling. I'm not a tool for you to use. The man tilted his head slightly, a faint smile playing on his lips. We shall see about that. In time, you will come to understand your true potential. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me in the cold, silent cell once more. His words echoed in my mind, a chilling reminder of the powerlessness I felt. I had no idea who these people were or what they wanted from me, but one thing was clear. They saw my visions as something to be exploited. As days turned into weeks, I clung to one thought. I had to find a way out for myself and for Elena. My curse had led me to this prison, but maybe it could also be the key to my escape. Weeks and weeks passed, and the acrylic cell became my entire world. The relentless cold, the suffocating silence, and the unyielding walls wore down my spirit. I had no sense of time, no way to mark the passing hours. My only companions were the sporadic visions that offered fleeting glimpses of life beyond my prison. Each vision was a cruel reminder of what I had lost, the freedom to live, to make choices, to be believed. Food and water continued to appear through the small slot at the base of my cell, but my captors remained unseen. The man in the suit never returned, and I was left with nothing but my thoughts and the occasional burst of foresight. The isolation gnawed at my sanity, the monotony blurring the edges of my reality. I began to wonder if I would ever escape, if I would ever see Elena or anyone else ever again. One day, as I lay on the floor staring at the ceiling, a vision struck me with an intensity that took my breath away. I saw myself, but not in the cell. I was in a small, dimly lit room, surrounded by screens and equipment. Men and women in lab coats moved around me, their faces obscured by masks. I was strapped to a chair, my head held in place by a metal frame. Electrodes were attached to my temples, and I felt a sharp, searing pain as they activated some sort of machine. The vision faded, leaving me gasping for air. My heart pounded in my chest, and I knew that whatever they had planned for me, it was far worse than the prison I currently endured. I had to escape, and soon. But how? The cell was impenetrable, and I had no tools or allies. My visions had shown me countless moments of danger and tragedy, but never a way out of my own nightmare. Desperation fueled my resolve. I began to study the cell more closely, searching for any weakness or patterns that might offer a chance at escape. I memorized the timing of the food deliveries, the faint hum of machinery, the shadows that moved outside the walls. I paid close attention to every detail, hoping to find something, anything that could help me. Months began to pass, and I grew weaker, both physically and mentally. The isolation was taking its toll, but I clung to the hope that my curse could also be my salvation. One night, as I drifted into a fitful sleep, another vision came to me. This time, it was different, clearer, more vivid. I saw the slot at the base of my cell where the food appeared. In the vision, the slot malfunctioned, jamming halfway open. I saw myself reaching through the gap, feeling around the edges and finding a small lever hidden just out of sight. I woke with a start, my mind racing. Could it be real? Could there actually be a way to escape through the food slot? It seemed impossible, but the vision was so clear, so precise, I had to try. The next day, I waited anxiously for the food delivery. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the slot open and the tray slide through. I held my breath, hoping for a malfunction, a sign that my vision was more than just a cruel tease. And then it happened. The slot jammed halfway open, just as I had seen. I rushed to the slot, my hands trembling with anticipation. Reaching through the gap, I felt around the edges, searching for the lever. My fingers brushed against something cold and metallic, and my heart leapt. I pressed down, and the slot opened wider. With a newfound determination, I squeezed through the opening, barely larger than a mailbox, my body protesting against the tight fit. I tumbled out of the cell and onto the cold concrete floor, gasping for air. For the first time in months, I was free of the acrylic prison. I didn't waste a moment. I scanned the vast, dimly lit space, looking for an exit. The room was filled with rows of similar cells, some empty, others occupied by motionless figures. I felt a pang of guilt, knowing I couldn't save them all, but I had to save myself first. I moved cautiously, staying low and out of sight. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the vast space, and I prayed that no one would hear me. I found a door at the end of the room and slipped through, entering a narrow hallway. The hum of machinery grew louder, and I followed the sound, hoping it would lead me to an exit. My heart pounded in my chest as I navigated the labyrinthian corridors. The vision of the lab and the men in lab coats haunted me, pushing me to move faster. I had no idea what awaited me on the other side, but I knew I couldn't stay here. Finally, I reached a staircase leading up. I climbed quickly, my legs burning with the effort. At the top, I found another door, this one marked with a glowing exit sign. Relief washed over me as I pushed it open and stepped into the night air. The cold wind hit my face and I breathed deeply, savoring the taste of freedom. I had no idea where I was or how far I had to go, but I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. But as I looked around, a new fear slowly gripped me. My visions had shown me the future countless times, but they had never shown me what to do next. I was on my own, navigating an uncertain world with nothing but my curse to guide me. I took a deep breath and started walking, determined to find answers, to find Elena, and to understand the true nature of my gift. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. I would never stop fighting for my freedom, for my sanity, and for the chance to be believed. The cold night air was a stark contrast to the sterile, suffocating environment of the acrylic cell. As I stumbled away from the building, I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. Freedom was a fragile thing, and I knew it could be snatched away at any moment. My mind raced, trying to piece together a plan. I needed to find shelter, to hide, but most importantly, I needed to find Elena. I had no idea where I was, but the distant lights of the city guided me. I moved quickly, keeping to the shadows, my senses heightened by the fear of being caught. The streets were mostly empty, a few cars passing by, their headlights cutting through the darkness. I made my way towards the city, my heart pounding with each step. Hours passed in a blur of exhaustion and fear. My body ached, but adrenaline kept me moving. As I neared the outskirts of the city, I spotted a small, rundown motel. It wasn't much, but it would provide a temporary refuge. I slipped inside, grateful for the anonymity of the place. The clerk barely looked up as I paid for a room, his eyes glazed with boredom. Inside the dingy room, I collapsed onto the bed. I needed to rest, to regroup, but sleep was elusive. My thoughts kept drifting back to Elena. I had to find her, to warn her. The vision of her bruised face haunted me, constant reminder of the danger she was in. As the first light of dawn crept through the grimy window, I formulated a plan. I needed to get to a public place, somewhere crowded where I could blend in and use a phone. The fear of being tracked was overwhelming, but I had no choice. I had to take the risk. I found a nearby diner, its neon sign flickering in the early morning light. I chose a booth in the back, away from prying eyes, and borrowed a phone from the waitress, giving her a strained smile. My fingers trembled as I dialed Elena's number. It rang several times, each second stretching into an eternity. Finally, she answered, her voice cautious and filled with relief. "Cassidy, is that you?" "Elena, thank God. Are you okay?" I asked, my voice urgent. "Yes, but they're watching me. I don't have much time. Where are you?" "I don't know exactly. I escaped, but I need to find you. Can you meet me somewhere safe?" There was a pause. Then she whispered, "The library downtown, in an hour." The line went dead, and I felt a surge of fear and determination. I paid for my coffee and left a generous tip, slipping out the diner and making my way to the downtown library. The city was waking up, the streets filling with people going about their day. I moved through the crowd, keeping my head down, my senses on high alert. The library loomed ahead, a grand old building with stone steps and tall, imposing doors. I slipped inside. the quiet atmosphere a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. I found a corner in the reading area, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. Minutes ticked by, each one filled with agonizing anticipation. Then I saw her, Elena, her face pale but determined, slipping through the door and making her way towards me. We embraced briefly, relief washing over us. "I'm so glad you're okay," she whispered, her eyes scanning the room. "We need to move quickly. They could be tracking us." "Who are they?" I asked, desperate for answers. Elena shook her head. "I don't know exactly. They've been following me ever since I talked to you. They know about your gift and they want to use it." I felt a chill run down my spine. "We need to figure out who they are and what they want, but first we need to stay hidden." Elena nodded, her expression grim. "I have a safe house. It's not far. We can regroup there." We moved quickly, slipping out of the library and into the crowded streets. Elena led the way, her pace brisk and determined. We navigated through alleys and side streets until we reached a small, unassuming house tucked away from prying eyes. Inside, the safe house was sparsely furnished but secure. Elena locked the door behind us and turned to face me. "We don't have much time. We need to plan our next move." I nodded, my mind racing. "We need to find out who they are and why they want me, and we need to stay ahead of them." Elena agreed, her eyes filled with determination. "We'll do it together. We'll find a way to stop them and to use your gift for good." As we sat down to plan, I felt a flicker of hope. For the first time, I wasn't alone. Together, we would fight back, uncover the truth, and use my visions to change our fate. The Cassandra complex might be a curse, but with Elena by my side, it could also become our greatest weapon. As we started discussing our next steps, a nagging doubt crept into my mind. Elena seemed too calm, too composed. My gut tightened, but I pushed the feeling aside. We had to stick together. Suddenly, Elena's demeanor shifted. She leaned in close, her eyes glinting with a strange intensity. "Cassidy, there's something you need to know," she said. But before I could react, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small device. It looked like a remote control. My heart skipped a beat. "What is that?" I asked, dread seeping into my voice. Elena smiled, a chilling smile that sent shivers down my spine. "I'm sorry, Cassidy. You were never meant to escape." She pressed the button on the device and the room filled with a high-pitched whine. Pain exploded in my head and I collapsed to the floor, clutching my temples. My visions came in a torrent, overlapping and chaotic, each one more horrifying than the last. "Why?" I managed to gasp, my vision blurring. Elena knelt beside me, her face cold and unfeeling. "You have a gift, Cassidy, a gift that can be controlled and used. They sent me to bring you back, and you made it so easy." Betrayal and fear washed over me as darkness closed in. The last thing I saw was Elena's face, twisted with a cruel satisfaction. My mind screamed in protest, but my body was paralyzed. I had trusted her, and she had led me right back into the trap. As consciousness slipped away, I knew one thing for certain. My fight was far from over. I had to survive, to find a way out and to stop them. But for now, I was once again at their mercy, a pawn in their sinister game.